Dwayne Johnson has built a career on being larger than life. The action hero, the charismatic showman, the global icon known simply as The Rock. But in The Smashing Machine, he shatters that image completely. Gone are the raised eyebrows, the catchphrases, and the box office swagger. Instead, he steps into the shoes of Mark Kerr, an MMA legend whose triumphs in the ring were shadowed by devastating battles with addiction and despair. To become Kerr, Johnson submitted himself to 3 grueling hours of makeup and prosthetics every single day, vanishing beneath the weight of transformation. His face, his body, even his posture, rewired for authenticity. And when asked why he would take on a role this raw, Johnson's answer was simple, but haunting. I wanted to play something that really allowed me to rip myself open. For a man whose name practically guarantees billion-dollar blockbusters, this choice is more than surprising, it's risky. The question is, why would Hollywood's most bankable star willingly strip away the armor that made him untouchable and expose the most vulnerable version of himself? Mark Kerr wasn't just another fighter chasing belts. He was a force of nature. A 2-time MMA world champion, feared in the cage yet fragile outside it. His story was one of extremes, dominance inside the ring, but a spiral of addiction and depression away from it. Back in 2002, filmmaker John Hyams captured Kerr's unraveling in a raw, unsettling documentary also called The Smashing Machine. It showed the reality behind the early days of mixed martial arts, a time when fighters hurled themselves at each other with brutal force and little regulation, while privately drowning in chaos, temptation, and self-destruction. Fast forward to 2025, and director Benny Safdie brings that same story to the big screen, with Dwayne Johnson stepping into Kerr's battered shoes. Safdie doesn't just use the documentary as inspiration. His film mirrors it closely, sometimes even replicating exact shots and offhand remarks. On paper, this fidelity sounds like a tribute, but turning a haunting piece of nonfiction into a scripted Hollywood drama isn't so simple. What was once messy and unpredictable now has to bend into a traditional movie arc. And that's where the cracks start to show. Benny Safdie built his reputation on films that feel like controlled chaos, uncut gems pulsed with panic. Heaven Knows What plunged into the raw grip of addiction, and Daddy Longlegs captured the unfiltered messiness of everyday life. His work has always carried a restless energy, a refusal to smooth the edges. But with The Smashing Machine, critics argue that energy is strangely absent. Instead of reinventing the story of Mark Kerr, Safdie stays tethered to John Hyams's 2002 documentary, recreating moments almost frame for frame. What once felt hauntingly real now risks coming off as hollow imitation. And then there's the romance. Safdie's choice to amplify the subplot between Kerr and his girlfriend, played by Emily Blunt, was supposed to humanize the fighter. Instead, it tilts toward melodrama, with Blunt's Dawn portrayed more as a caricature than a fully realized partner. Their relationship becomes loud and theatrical, clashing with the film's otherwise subdued tone. For some viewers, it's the weakest link, a distraction that undercuts the raw core of Kerr's story. Yet, despite the uneven storytelling, one element consistently rises above the criticism: Dwayne Johnson himself. Stripped of his action hero armor, he digs deep, disappearing into the pain and fragility of a man on the edge. The question becomes, how did Johnson manage to deliver such a towering performance when the film around him falters? When Dwayne Johnson steps into The Smashing Machine, he doesn't just play Mark Kerr, he becomes him. The transformation is so complete that at times you forget you're looking at one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Hours of prosthetics and makeup strip away The Rock and replace him with a man beaten down by his own choices. His shoulders hunch, his movements slow, his voice softens into something haunted. He is unrecognizable, not because of the cosmetic tricks, but because of the weight he carries in every frame. Johnson's portrayal of addiction is chilling in its precision. He doesn't lean on cliches of glazed stares or sloppy despair. Instead, it's in the eyes. The way they remain focused, even in the haze of narcotics. The flicker of fear when withdrawal looms. The desperate calm as Kerr clings to fleeting moments of numbness. It's a performance rooted in restraint. No grand gestures, no actorly flourishes, just the quiet truth of a man drowning in plain sight. And perhaps most striking is Johnson's willingness to be ugly on screen. Not physically, but emotionally. He lets the audience see the desperation, the neediness, the fragility that so many stars would avoid to protect their image. It's an act of selflessness as an actor, choosing honesty over spectacle, vulnerability over vanity. But that level of raw authenticity doesn't come from technique alone. It raises the question, what parts of Dwayne Johnson's own past did he have to dig into? What personal demons did he confront to bring Mark Kerr's pain to life so convincingly? For Dwayne Johnson, this role wasn't just about stepping into someone else's darkness, it was about revisiting his own. In interviews, he's been candid about the moment that defined his adolescence, the day his family was evicted from their home when he was just 15. That sense of helplessness, the raw despair of watching everything collapse, stayed with him for decades. And when it came time to embody Mark Kerr, Johnson tapped directly into that memory. Every scene of quiet desperation, every whispered plea for stability. It's all drawn from a place he's carried since childhood. This marks a sharp pivot from the Dwayne Johnson audiences have known for years. For much of his career, he admits he was chasing something: box office dominance, global recognition, the next blockbuster. And by most measures, he achieved it all. But underneath the success, there was an emptiness. "I was chasing something for a lot of years," he confessed, "but I wasn't being fulfilled." That's why The Smashing Machine feels different. It isn't about bigger explosions or higher stunts. It's about digging into pain, loss, and humanity. It's a transformation not just on screen, but off it as well. Johnson isn't content to simply be the action star anymore. He's searching for roles that leave a mark, that speak to something deeper. Which leads to the inevitable question: if this is the new Dwayne Johnson we're seeing, where exactly does he want his career to go from here? When The Smashing Machine premiered at the Venice Film Festival, all eyes were on Dwayne Johnson, and the reaction was immediate. Critics and fans alike agreed on one thing: his performance was unlike anything they'd ever seen from him. Reviewers praised the rawness, the vulnerability, the sheer commitment that allowed him to vanish into Mark Kerr's troubled world. For the first time, Johnson wasn't just good for an action star, he was flat out good. But not every element of the film received the same acclaim. While Johnson drew near-universal praise, the movie itself left audiences divided. Some applauded its fidelity to the original documentary, but many felt the pacing dragged, and the amplified romantic subplot with Emily Blunt weakened the core story. The result was a film both praised and critiqued in the same breath. An uneven work elevated by a towering central performance. Still, awards chatter is already circling. Industry insiders have whispered about Johnson becoming a serious contender in categories usually reserved for actors known more for prestige than popcorn. And yet, Johnson himself has been quick to temper expectations. He avoids Oscar talk, brushing it off with humility, insisting that for him, the real reward was the chance to dig deeper and grow as an artist. That humility raises a bigger question. Could this role be the one that finally redefines Dwayne Johnson? Not as a global superstar, not as The Rock, but as an actor respected for dramatic depth? In many ways, The Smashing Machine is part of a larger trend sweeping through Hollywood right now: the rise of authentic grit. These are films that lean heavily on analog textures, period-accurate settings, and carefully chosen needle drops to evoke a sense of realism. They revel in liminal spaces, dimly lit living rooms, faded gyms, and strip mall backdrops that feel plucked straight from a forgotten VHS tape. On the surface, this style screams authenticity, but critics argue it's becoming a formula in itself. That's the knock against Benny Safdie's version of the smashing machine. Some say it's less a bold reimagining and more a box-checking exercise, dressing up in the trappings of grit without bringing the raw electricity Safdie is known for. The atmosphere is right, the textures are right, the mood is right, but is that enough? Or is it simply a stylish recreation of someone else's pain? Yet, even within this debate, one element refuses to be dismissed: Johnson's performance. He cuts straight through the stylized nostalgia and lands in something real, something that feels alive. His work doesn't just lean on aesthetics, it transcends them, grounding the film in a humanity that no lighting trick or soundtrack choice could replicate. And that's why the conversation keeps circling back to him. Because if the smashing machine risks becoming another formulaic entry in the authentic grit wave, Johnson himself might be the force powerful enough to break through the formula and prove there's still something truly original left to be found. For Dwayne Johnson, the smashing machine isn't just another role, it's a turning point. He's called it a whole new book in his career, and it's not hard to see why. After decades of playing the hero who never breaks, here he allows himself to fracture, to bleed, to collapse under the weight of real human struggle. It's a reinvention, not by abandoning his past, but by proving he can stretch far beyond it. Off-screen, though, Johnson still keeps his balance. At his Virginia farm, he spends quiet time with his family, away from the cameras and the Hollywood grind. That contrast between the man who bears his soul on screen and the man who seeks peace in private only makes his artistic choices more compelling. He hasn't walked away from the blockbusters either. With Moana 2 on the horizon and other projects lined up, he's still very much the megastar audiences expect. But now, he's something more: vulnerable, complex, and unafraid to chase roles that test him in ways money and fame never could. Which leaves us with the question audiences are already debating. Could the smashing machine be the role that finally secures The Rock's place among serious actors?